Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take complex financial guides, all that professional research, and we strip out the jargon.
Right.
And we give you the essential knowledge you need to make better decisions and to do it fast.
Mm.
So if you've been wondering, where do I put my money or how do I even assess the advice I'm getting, today's deep dive it's foundational. We are going right back to the very first principle of financial health.
We are. It's all about defining the job your money must do for you.
Exactly.
We're digging into this really detailed, comprehensive guide. It's the kind of thing professional advisors use to build investor profiles. But the real win here, the real benefit of this deep dive is for you, for the individual investor to use that exact same framework.
Okay, so you're saying we're drawing a line in the sand.
A bright, necessary line. It's between what you want your money to do and what you absolutely need it to do to have real, sustainable security.
Okay, so let's unpack that distinction right away because it sounds like it dictates everything else.
It does.
The sources are really clear on this. Needs come before wants. You might want the thrill, the possibility of a 20% annual return. It's exciting, right? It grabs headlines.
Of course. Everyone does.
But when you actually run the numbers on your real life, you might find that to guarantee your lifestyle and retirement, you only need let's say, a guaranteed, much lower risk 9% return.
And that 9% need becomes the master requirement.
Yeah.
It immediately points you to a lower risk approach. It completely rules out chasing after those speculative, high volatility investments.
So needs are the foundation.
They are your fundamental motivation.
Okay.
They're about survival. They're about security benchmarks. I mean, they form the reliable, stress-tested basis for every single decision you should be making with your money.
So, okay, how do we structure these core needs? Instead of just, reading off a massive list, let's try to categorize them, maybe into 3 buckets.
Something like that.
Say. The survival needs, the structural needs, and then the legacy needs. So when advisors analyze a client, they're running through a checklist that covers all of these. Let's start with those survival needs. The stuff that keeps the lights on and the whole plan from falling apart.
Okay, so the sources identify a few foundational ones here, the non-negotiables.
Where are they?
First, the need for income, both present and future. Then specifically, retirement income.
Right.
Then you've got the need for tax efficiency, which is huge. And finally, the 2 big defensive ones. The need for an emergency fund and the need for liquidity.
So those 5 they're the prerequisites? You don't even talk about growth until those are sorted.
You can't. Survival first.
Okay, let's focus on that biggest one then, income. It sounds like the analysis starts right there.
It has to. Your current income must be enough to cover your cost of living and whatever you're trying to save. If it falls short right now.
Any big investment plan is just a fantasy. It's unsustainable.
Exactly. You have to stabilize the present before you can build the future. And it's really about setting realistic goals. To give your savings plan any meaning, your income goals have to have a specific dollar value attached to them.
A real number, not just more money.
A real number. What dollar amount do you need to generate? And we also have to assess it differently, based on family status. If you're single, you compare your income to your expenses. But for couples.
You have to look at the whole household picture, the total family income and expenses.
And, this is vital, you always have to factor in the income needs for any dependents. Children, elderly parents, whoever.
Whether you're single or a couple, that number has to be in there.
Absolutely. If the profile shows that present income isn't enough, then the focus has to shift immediately. You have to review the budget, optimize it. But let's assume present income is stable.
Okay.
Then the investment plan's main job becomes meeting future income needs.
Yeah.
And for most people, that means one thing.
Retirement planning. Exactly. Retirement income. It's just the money you need to replace or, supplement your employment income once you stop working.
And that money can come from all over, right?
Yeah.
Government pensions, private ones, your own investments.
Or even, some continued maybe lower intensity work. Or business dividends if you keep a stake in something.
So here's where it gets a bit tricky, I imagine.
This is where the planning gets nuanced. What's fascinating is what we call the net income trap. So many people calculate their required gross income goal,
The before tax number.
the before tax number, but your actual spending power in retirement has to be based entirely on your net income, the amount you have left after all the taxes are paid.
And if you overlook that tax burden,
It's one of the fastest ways to fall short of your goal.
well, that transitions us perfectly into our next core survival need. Maximizing that net income through tax efficiency. This seems like a critical area where smart planning can really pay off.
It really does. And one of the most powerful strategies here is something called income splitting.
Okay, what's that? It's defined as basically apportioning income between individuals to take advantage of different marginal tax rates.
So between spouses, for example.
Often between spouses or common law partners, yes. The goal is always to shift income to the person in the lower tax bracket,
Yeah.
and that reduces the overall tax paid by the household.
And this isn't just like a theoretical few dollars. It can have a big impact.
A significant measurable impact, yeah. Let's look at the example of David and Beth from the sources.
Okay.
So David gets an annual pension of $18,690. He's the high earner, so his marginal tax rate is 37%. If he just takes that income himself, his tax bill is almost $7,000.
Wow. Okay.
But his wife, Beth, she's in a lower marginal tax bracket, let's say 29%. So when David splits that pension income equally with her for tax purposes,
They each claim half.
right, David's tax portion plummets to about $3,500
Hmm.
and Beth's is around $2,700.
So the combined tax bill is now, what, just over $6,000?
$6,167 to be exact, which is a direct savings of over $740 a year.
Just for strategically allocating the income, that's real money that you saved, not money you had to earn through market risk.
Precisely. And this strategy isn't just for pensions. I mean, the mechanisms are broad. You can use a spousal RRSP, for example. The higher earner contributes, but the lower earner withdraws it later, hopefully in a lower tax bracket.
Then for older folks,
For those 65 and up, governments often allow certain annuity and registered plan incomes to be split right on the tax return. The principle works pretty much anywhere with a progressive tax system.
and there's another subtle benefit here too, right? Something about government benefit clawbacks.
Yes, that's a great point. You see it in places like Canada with the Old Age Security, the OAS. When you lower the taxable income of the higher earner through splitting, you can actually reduce how much of those benefits they have to pay back to the government.
So it protects your net income on two fronts. It cuts the direct tax and safeguards your benefits.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So beyond income splitting, what's the second major pillar of tax efficiency?
Utilizing tax credits. We just can't overlook the value of using every single available federal, provincial, or territorial tax credit.
And the key thing to understand is that most of them are, what, non-refundable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Non-refundable. They can reduce the tax you owe down to zero, but if the credit is bigger than your tax bill, you don't get the difference back as a cash refund.
So you have to plan carefully to make sure you're using them fully every year.
You do.
Okay, so once we've defined the income we need and, maximized it through being tax smart, we move to the defensive side of these survival needs.
Right. We pivot from growing and optimizing to building defenses against the unexpected.
And that brings us to the big one.
The non-negotiable need for an emergency fund. This is your first line of defense. It has to be a readily available sum of money.
The rule of thumb is usually 3 to 6 months living expenses.
A minimum of 3, yeah. And it must be liquid, and it must be used strictly for sudden income loss or a true unexpected expense.
Because the whole point is financial hygiene, isn't it? It stops you from having to use high-cost debt, like a credit card advance, or being forced to sell your investments at the worst possible time.
Absolutely. And that flows directly into the next need, which is liquidity.
Okay, how is that different from an emergency fund?
Well, the emergency fund is a specific pot of cash. Liquidity is a broader concept. It's how easily and quickly you can turn any asset into cash at the lowest possible cost.
So they're related, but distinct. The emergency fund itself has to be highly liquid.
Exactly. Think about a real-world scenario. You're traveling, you have a serious medical issue, and your insurance doesn't cover it. You need cash now. That money can't be tied up in real estate.
Got it.
And this is where the sources offer an interesting idea for the informed investor. They suggest a home equity line of credit, HELOC, can be a good tool for emergency liquidity if you have the equity.
It gives you immediate access to capital at a lower rate than credit cards.
Right. But you have to remember, it is still debt. It's secured against your house. So it's a great safety valve. But it's no substitute for having that 3 months of expenses saved in actual cash.
Okay, moving on to the last defensive need. This one is often misunderstood. Creditor protection.
Yeah, this one needs some careful clarification. Creditor protection is when a creditor can't legally seize an asset to repay a debt.
And certain products, like some insurance policies or retirement accounts, come with this feature.
They do. But it should only ever be considered incidentally. It's an attractive bonus feature, not the sole reason for choosing an investment.
That's the crucial caveat, isn't it? You pick the investment because it helps you meet your goals.
Precisely. And the sources warn about this. If a court decides you chose an investment solely to hide money from creditors during bankruptcy, they might seize it anyway.
Intent matters.
Intent is everything.
Excellent distinction. So once we have our defenses, secure liquidity, protection, we have to look at building and maintaining the fortress for the long haul. And that brings us to our second category of needs, structural health.
Right. Things like diversification, investment management, and suitability.
Let's start with diversification.
It's critical. The risk of major losses just skyrockets when your savings are all concentrated in one place, one account, one country, one type of investment. You're setting yourself up for a single point of failure.
Can you give us an example that isn't just, don't put all your money in one stock?
Sure. Think about an investor who puts all their savings into guaranteed investment certificates, or GICs. They feel safe, right? Zero market risk.
But they have a huge concentration risk.
A massive one. Against inflation. If their GIC returns are consistently lower than the cost of living, their actual purchasing power is getting eroded every single year. They need to diversify into things that can potentially beat inflation.
And diversification isn't just about different stocks.
No, it's about different asset classes, different parts of the world, different time horizons.
This complexity often leads to the need for professional help or investment management. Why do some people absolutely need this?
Well, some people may just lack basic financial literacy, or they struggle to understand the complex statements they get, or, and this is maybe the most dangerous, they make unsuitable choices driven by emotion, fear, or greed, and they end up taking on way too much risk for their age or their goals.
And that ties right into the final and maybe most critical structural need, suitability.
Yes, this is a formal, ongoing process. The industry calls it KYC, or Know Your Client, analysis. An advisor has to compare the features of an investment against your goals, your constraints, and your actual risk profile.
It's the safeguard. It's what stops a retiree from putting their entire nest egg into a crypto startup.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is that suitability isn't a one-time thing. It's established when you make the investment, but it has to be re-examined. If you have a big life change retirement, an inheritance, the review has to happen again.
Let's make this real. The sources have a great example with Louis and Miriam.
Yes. This one really drives home the importance of suitability. So Miriam is 62. She just received $1 million from a life insurance payout. Her profile is crystal clear.
Zero risk tolerance.
Zero. She's retiring in 3 years, and her number one concern is protecting that capital and making sure it provides the income she needs.
So Luis, the advisor, he sees this lump sum, but he also sees her age, her risk profile, her timeline. He knows she can't afford any market volatility.
Right. So the suitable recommendation wasn't a portfolio of high-growth stocks. It was a low-risk option, like a deferred term annuity.
Something that guarantees a safe income stream starting right when she retires.
It perfectly matched her need for guaranteed income and capital preservation. The suitable investment wasn't the most exciting one, but it was the one that guaranteed her survival.
Okay, that brings us to our third and final category of needs, legacy and final needs. This is about what happens after all the survival and structural goals are met.
Right. For people who have a strong desire to leave an inheritance, whether it's to family or charity, that requires careful estate planning.
Making sure assets are in the right structures, wills are up to date, that kind of thing.
All of it, to minimize taxes and delays after death.
And charitable giving often gets folded into this. The sources point out a really interesting tax detail here.
They do. So during your lifetime, a taxpayer can usually deduct up to 75% of their net income as a donation for tax credit purposes.
But here's the kicker, right, for estate planning.
This is the kicker. In the year of a person's death, or the year right before it, that limit jumps dramatically. Up to 100% of net income can be claimed as a donation.
Which allows an estate to massively offset its final tax bill if the person had a strong charitable intent.
It's a powerful tool.
And then we have the catch-all category. Other specific needs. This is where the profile gets really individual.
Exactly. After you do all the analysis, you might find an investor with a high marginal tax rate has a specific need for tax-advantaged investments.
Or someone retiring young has a specific need to protect against decades of inflation.
Or you might find a complex dual need. An investor needs to grow assets with some risk to meet a big estate goal, and at the same time needs to preserve capital to buy an annuity for their own income.
It really brings us full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The core lesson from this deep dive is that successful financial planning has to start with an honest, detailed look at your fundamental needs.
Security, survival, tax optimization.
Those needs are the bedrock. They have to drive every single decision and force you to prioritize reality over speculative wants.
And if you connect it to the bigger picture, the whole framework is about building a solid foundation. You define your goals in dollar terms, you set up your defenses, that emergency fund diversification, and only then do you start pursuing tailored growth strategies.
Safety first.
Always.
This brings up an important final question for people to think about. If the industry requires advisors to re-examine suitability after a major life change, how often should you, on your own, proactively conduct your own suitability review, even without an agent, just to make sure that your current wants, driven by market headlines or short-term excitement, haven't subtly pulled you away from the reality of your fundamental needs?
That is something worth mulling over.